Hey gang, welcome to Tuesdays with Rick and Rusty. Rick, got a new format today.
We do have a new format today. Should we admit that we're recording this now? That it's not
Let's
live?
go ahead and do it. Yes.
So that any mistakes we make,
Right.
we can edit out if we want to, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Are you kidding? We don't. You do make mistakes ever when you do a live
Oh
service
my
where you,
goodness. Yes. Yeah. So
okay.
much so we could have a full blooper reel at the end of the year. Lots of good stuff.
And for my years of doing, live news on television, I always, people would always ask, do you get nervous? And I'd say, well, after so many years, the early days I got nervous. After doing it a number of years, you get anxious. You get excited. The adrenaline starts pumping when you're getting ready to do a show or you do it live. And when you get to the mistakes, which we all make, especially when it's live, I always try to tell people that it's in space now. It's going up to the satellites now in space, and people on other planets can watch our mistakes. I hope you
That's
don't mind
right.
Bentley barking, by the way, in the
No, no,
background.
no. I love the sound of the dog. One of my guilty pleasures, and I usually do this on Sunday evenings, is I will go to YouTube and I will search for news bloopers and watch them. And I've never seen you come up there yet, but because I speak for a living and I make enough mistakes and I'm scared of making mistakes, watching other people make mistakes and faux pas is just hilarious and almost cathartic for me.
They're funny, and it's interesting. They're nightmarish at the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've had a few colleagues, a few of my co-anchors who got ill during a show
Ooh.
and did everything they could just to muster up all the courage they could to get through a segment or a story before having to run off the set, and to the point where I actually grabbed one of my co-anchors. She was starting to get up while she was on camera. She didn't know she was about to be on camera. And I kind of pulled her back down to sit down. And then we managed to get to the break, and then I let her go, and she didn't make it to her destination. Let's just say that. And that's just real life. That just happens.
It is. It
But
is.
when we're
Sometimes
live, like you are doing a service or I was doing the news, you're there for everybody to see. There's nothing you can do. You're right out there for the whole world to see.
No, yeah. There have been several times I've come out from backstage and it's dark when I come out. And depending on what it is they've set up on stage, it could be a guitar, pedals. It could be just some stage prop. I have nearly fallen on my face many times, tripping over things. And then I try to walk off stage and I can't find the way out or the curtain. It's the old, like the Johnny Carson bit, trying to find the opening of the curtain. But there's been a few times I've thought I may actually throw up on stage. And fortunately, I have not done that yet. But then I make that blooper reel, and then I'm on that. So one day.
There you go. So some of the inside news that happens with any performance you have to do that's live. All right. We call this Tuesdays with Rick and Rusty. We know a lot of you are sitting at home just like we are, bored out of your minds. So we thought it'd be fun to try to entertain you a little bit, talk a little about sports, pop culture, and then wrap things up with faith. And we like to also give out shout outs of local businesses. So we hope you enjoy yourselves for the next 20 minutes or so. We start with sports, and last weekend, now I know I'm more of a draft nerd, I think, than you are, Rusty, when it comes to the NFL. I'm a year-round guy with my team. So even though, the Lakers may be playing, I've got one eye on what transactions the Rams are making or what their off-season program is all about. I'm 12 months a year with my Rams, so the draft meant a lot to me. You being a fan of the defending Super Bowl champions, you were at the very end of the first round. And were you happy with how the Chiefs drafted?
I was, and typically in years past, I'm a lot more tuned into it than I was this year. And I think it's because since we've won, I feel like my job is done. I worked so hard for them over the last 48 years to get them to where they are. I felt like I could take this one off, although because there's no sports on, I found it to be incredibly compelling. And the fact that they were doing all this from people's homes, ESPN did an amazing job of making this really entertaining because we got to see into people's homes. The Belichick kitchen was hilarious. Yeah. The dog behind the computer, no decorations, no bulbs on the, or no globes on the bulbs and the lights. And So to answer your question, yes, I thought we had a great draft. I loved getting our fast running back first, and then we started getting linemen both sides of the ball, which we desperately needed. So I'm pleased. I thought it turned out well. I mean, what do you think? As a Rams fan, you guys gave up a lot in the offseason or lost a lot. Did you get anything back?
Well, so we lost a lot. We've made trades in the past that we haven't had a first round draft pick since 2016. We will not have one next year either, unless there's some kind of a trade. We traded 2 first rounders for a defensive back named Jalen Ramsey, who, I will say is better than any first round draft pick we would get. So for me, the anticipation is a little different. And by the way, you were right about how well the draft went for the NFL. The most viewed draft ever in the history of the NFL. That just shows you how bored we were at home.
That's right. That's right.
My team, it's interesting, because I really, my wife will tell you, I'm analyzing before and during and after the draft. And while the picks are going on, I'm looking at the best available players to see who we could potentially draft. And it really hit home this season more than ever is no matter how the analysts rank all the players, my team, I know for certain, and I think that other successful teams like Belichick and I'm sure Andy Reid are the same way, you just, forget about the list of best prospects available because these guys, I think, so much deeper than that. They're finding guys from Division, 2, Division 3 sometimes, and we drafted a kicker in the 7th round. So we drafted guys that were not high on the list of prospects, and then you look at their game film and you're like, wow, that guy's pretty good. And so I just have to have trust and faith in my general manager and coach because they didn't draft the guys that I was kind of looking at and hoping that they would draft. So I hope they know what they're doing. They did in the past. Cooper Kupp was a 3rd or 4th round pick that everybody said they chose way too high. So they've got a history of drafting guys that they really like, maybe a round or 2 higher than most other teams would draft them. And that makes sense. If you really like them, go get them.
Did you, and I missed this, but somebody told me about it later. Do you see that the Carolina Panthers took a Division II player in the 1st round? I think with like the 7th or 8th pick or something like that. I mean, that seems like an overreach in my opinion.
It's tough to know. I mean, you talk about, you're right, a roll of the dice. All the players in the draft, I don't care, if they're the number 1 or number 2 pick, as we know, it's a roll of the dice, right? You don't know if these guys are going to pan out. But then you go into Division II and you pull out a guy. And I mean, it makes a little more sense when it's a Carson Wentz kind of a guy who's a quarterback who just has these incredible skills. But in general, you're right, man. It's a gutsy move. But it kind of goes back to this idea that if Sean McVay, the coach of the Rams, sees something in a guy that nobody's ever heard of, you have to bet that Andy Reid has seen that same guy or has heard about him from his scouts. So I think what they do is they say, all right, we know that this guy is going to be grabbed. Maybe it's the 2nd or 3rd round. We don't know if he's going to be there by the time it's our pick. We might as well pick him early. So I think that's why we saw more of that.
Yeah, and not to over spiritualize the NFL draft, and we don't have to jump to faith just yet. But something you said a second ago, I think rings true about our relationship with God. Here you are, a fan of your LA Rams, and you don't always understand the picks that they make, but you just have to trust that your general manager and your head coach simply know more about it than you do. And I think about many of the questions that you and I have about faith and many other people have about faith does come down to, can we trust the guy piloting this whole thing, which in our case would be God? Do we trust that he knows more than we do, I guess is the question.
It's a little easier to trust that guy, though, than the human beings that are running the NFL.
Not to compare Sean McVay to God.
But I get the analogy.
You do get the analogy, right?
Well, by the way, that's we joke. You and I've joked about this before. We've taken in some NFL games together. It is funny how spiritual we get when it comes to sports. I mean, we're praying. I loved my interviews with Tommy Lasorda back in the day when he would talk about the big Dodger in the sky, and it's all around sports. I don't care how religious you are, and I've interviewed the guys that are very spiritual, and I've interviewed people who probably have no interest in theology whatsoever. But there is that common denominator about praying to the big guy up there that you hope is on your side during kickoff. And I assume you're going to tell me as a pastor that God doesn't have a favorite team.
Well, that's true, but I sure don't believe that at times. For a while, I thought God was a Patriots fan, but I just knew that would be against his nature to be, for cheaters. So I don't know. We do tend to over spiritualize it. I think most of it is superstitions. We just feel like, it's like the baseball players that don't wash their socks if they're on a hitting streak or those kind of things. And I think part of our superstition becomes the rabbit's foot of God. So we'll throw him a prayer once in a while and make sure we're all good there so he blesses our game.
Well, and we used to get a kick out of the guys in the locker room afterward who would say, and it's great to see people, thank God at the end of a great performance or a team. But then you got the guy in the other locker room who has the equal amount of faith. What is he thinking? Is he a little upset with the big guys?
I know. They both went to chapel together before the game, and now one of them's thanking God for the win, and the other one's wondering why.
And then I can imagine the prayer circle on the field after the game too. It's like,
oh, exactly.
Half of them are happy, the other half are like, I don't know if he was here for me today. It's funny how that works. We have some good news as far as sports. At least we hope. It looks like the NBA, Rusty, may open up some of their facilities as soon as this Friday, and that'll take place, no doubt, in the states where they're starting to loosen their stay-at-home restrictions. So, for example, in Georgia, I assume that means the Atlanta Hawks can probably start to train. It's caused a little bit of anxiety in the NBA for a couple of reasons. The first professional athletes that we heard about being positive for COVID-19 were from the NBA. So there are some guys that aren't sure about getting started again. But there are other teams who are saying, wait a minute, if we're in California or we're in New York, are you saying we can go to Atlanta to train? Why not just let us train in our own building? So I guess my first question to you is, are you excited at the prospect that it could get going? And then when you start to think it out and play everything through, are you thinking to myself, wait a minute, this is not fair for my Lakers?
Well, I think that they ought to just create some kind of a procedures and policies here where you get tested for corona and then you go into a quarantined place and then you start practicing. And then let's get these games going. I agree with you. Yeah, if you can fly out of state and practice there, but you can't practice here, well, that's going to jeopardize, how clean they think their facilities are. But I say you test them and then you let them play, and let's go for this. I mean, what is it that Adam Silver said? He wants the NBA to be responsible for restarting the economy. Hey, I'm all for it, buddy. Let's get this going.
Well, it couldn't come at a better time because there's talk that the NBA is going to start asking the players to take a 25% pay cut. And it's interesting because if you're LeBron James, or Anthony Davis, I guess, that's a little easier to do. But if you're the fringe guy, like our buddy Mike Penber, that used to play for the Lakers, we've had this conversation with, is that if you're the guy that's just trying to make the team, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And this is where you see guys stepping up and paying for other people's salaries on the team. Several guys started paying for the, the workers in the coliseums in which they play, the arenas. That's a class act because we forget all the other people that are impacted by this. Similar to when the writers' strike happened in LA, we forget about all the craft foods people and the grips and the lighting guys that are really impacted by this. So, yeah, I think everybody's equally motivated now to get back to playing basketball because of that very thing.
So that allows us to make a transition to golf because for a while there, it appeared that golf would be the first professional sport to become active again. They've scheduled some events already. We're talking about, I believe it's in June in Texas, and golf makes a lot of sense. But there's an event that's right now, unofficial. They're thinking in May of having just a 4-person tournament. Tiger Woods, Peyton Manning, and then Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. And they would play each other. Now Mickelson and Tiger, the last time an event like this happened, made millions of dollars. Apparently they're not going to get paid this time. And any of the money that comes in from this will go to those folks on the front lines fighting coronavirus. So that's a neat idea. But that would be a great TV event. And I think that is, golf is so much easier to try to make happen under some of the restrictions that we have?
Well, I don't watch a lot of golf. It's kind of what I watch when I want to drift off to sleep on the couch on a Sunday afternoon. Uh, but I would watch that. That would be fascinating. My only hope is that they mic all four of them up and that they just talk all kinds of trash to each other, because that would make it really, really compelling.
Well, we know that Brady, he loves to talk. I mean,
Yeah,
and it's not just against the guys on defense. He'll yell at his own guys. So
that's
yeah,
right.
that would be good to listen in on. And they're all four very competitive people, but and so I think that they would play hard and try to play to win. But
Right.
so that would be interesting. I would look forward to that and would watch
Yeah,
that. So, yeah.
I would hope that they would do that. That'd be great television.
So that's something you would watch from a sports standpoint. Well, let's move on to pop culture now.
Hmm.
I get the impression just from our conversations that you enjoy your movies. I think
Hmm.
you and your wife, and I know that my wife and I, that's one of our favorite things to do. We're movie junkies, and I always think about the people that will get you into the theater the minute you hear that they've got a movie being released. What
Hmm.
actor for you would be the actor that you're like, that's it. Opening night on Friday night, we're going to go.
Hmm. For me, it's okay. You're going to laugh when I say this, and I know the guy's crazy, but I love Tom Cruise movies.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think they're so cool and so fun. And usually it's like Mission Impossible or Jack
Sure.
Reacher or those kind of things. But even the stuff that he's done that's more drama oriented. I mean, A Few Good Men is one of my favorite movies of all time. The Firm. Um, I just think he's fun. He's a great actor. And I think, was it Maverick supposed to come out this summer? And it's probably
Yes.
been delayed. But
Yeah, the new Top
yeah,
Gun.
definitely Tom Cruise. The other one I'd say is, and I think we would agree on this, is Denzel Washington. I
Yeah.
just love everything he does.
I'm glad you said Denzel, and I'm just gonna click over and read some of his his movies, because Denzel Washington for me, except for the romantic comedies, the few that he's done, but just in order of the recent flicks he's done, Equalizer, which I loved, the movie Training Day is a classic, Flight, Man on Fire, Malcolm X. Um, the Book of Eli, Glory. I mean, he has just been in so much stuff, and anything that involves anything that's intense, is something that I really enjoy a lot. So,
What are the romantic comedies he's done? I can only
well,
think of The Preacher's Wife.
I was afraid to say anything to the pastor about that, but I'm not
That's
rushing
okay.
in for that. I'm not, because I just love his intensity. You
Hmm.
can't, and Fences is another great one. He's just an incredible actor. So he's one of my favorites. And you think about guys like him, and I put him in the same category with the De Niro's and the Pacinos and those guys where they've had so many hit movies. You got a younger generation of guys, like I like Ryan Reynolds a lot, and Chris Pratt. They're what I love about them is that they're self-deprecating kind of a humor, that
Right.
they make fun of themselves a lot. These real handsome guys that are, well built, and yet they're constantly making fun
Right.
of themselves. So, I enjoy seeing people like that as well.
Speaking of Chris Pratt, Rick, are you a Parks and Rec fan?
It's funny. They used to film Parks and Recs on the lot where I worked when I was at one of the networks, and so you'd see some of the cast and crew come by. I had never seen an episode of the show, and it wasn't until he came on the scene, as a movie actor, as doing more film, that I saw just bits and pieces of some of the episodes. Uh,
Hmm.
but I know it's a popular show. Were you a fan of that show?
I was not at the time, but we started watching it, since it went off the air, and my kids love it, and it is entertaining. I'm more of an Office fan than Parks and Rec, and other people that go the other way with that. But my kids are excited because Thursday night they're doing a new Parks and Rec episode,
Hmm.
shot on iPhones from their homes as their characters. So it's all for charity, but it is basically a reunion show, which hadn't really been discussed before this event. So it should be fun television, 8:30 on
Well,
NBC.
It should be great, and he's blown up into a big star. And you know, there were rumors for a while. I know he did the Jurassic Park movies or Jurassic World movies, but there was a rumor for a while that he might, you know, take over the role of Indiana Jones at some point. That hasn't happened yet because Harrison Ford is still he'll be the next Indiana Jones. But you know, he's a guy who has blown up, and I've enjoyed his work. I loved him in Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, that was a movie that made me cry in some scenes. You know, those are the newer guys, the younger guys that are getting me into the theater as well. You ready to move on to faith?
Let's do it.
Like the one you love, it has been the series at Real Life Church, and in the very first series that weekend, your part of your service, Pastor Rusty, was to talk about no, and there are 5 elements to this series, which I'll let you explain more thoroughly. So number 1 was no. Number 2 is trust. And so yesterday's services involved trust.
Yes. So we're doing this relational attachment model, which was developed by Dr. John Van Epp. And he is a psychologist, counselor, marriage and family therapist. And he talks about these 5 things. We refer to them like the levers on a soundboard, you know, that, Rick, where you have to, you know, you adjust various things. Well, unfortunately, in our relationships, you get some of these out of whack, and it's good if you start at the very beginning, which is the word no, K-N-O-W. You got to know this person, and then you begin to trust them. You want to dial that up a little bit. And we did talk about that this weekend. Mike Bro did a phenomenal job, had a guest worship leader in Colton Dixon from American Idol fame, and a little game in the middle of truth or dare with a married couple in our church. And it's just great. So Mike talked about this element of trust and kind of dialing that up a little bit. He had this great line, and I wrote it down, Rick, in prep for today. And he said, before marriage, keep your eyes wide open. But after you get married, keep them half closed. I thought that was pretty good wisdom there. You know, keep your eyes open what you're getting into when it comes to relationships. Are these people you can really trust? Because not everybody needs to be trusted. They need to be loved. They don't always have to get your life. And so you start with no, and then you move to trust. And Bro had some great stuff about how to rebuild trust when it's been broken, how to give trust back after it's been broken. So I recommend people to go there, rlcmonline.org or reallifechurch.org. To get that content, but just really good stuff. Now that's the second part, trust. Next week, Rick, we're going to talk about this element of rely. It's one thing to know somebody, and it's another thing even to trust on them, but what if you begin to rely on them? And this is really hard for us guys because we're kind of like, I got this, I don't need anybody. But this element of being able to rely on each other and kind of be hands off and say, you got this, is huge. And we have a special guest this weekend. I didn't know about this guy till a friend of mine told me about him, but there's this country music YouTube sensation, a guy named Coffey Anderson, C-O-F-F-E-Y Anderson. And he's great, from Texas, which, by the way, when we started talking, he asked me where I was from. I said, Kansas. He said, you a Jayhawks fan? I said, actually, I'm a Sooners fan. And he nearly ended the call right there because he's a hook 'em horns, you know, Longhorns guy. Anyway, his unique story is not only his music, but his wife had a rare form of cancer recently and went through not only the methods you do to deal with cancer, but she received some other treatment and found some healing. It's a pretty incredible story. And so he and his wife both are going to share a little bit about how they learned to rely on each other and on God during this time. And then I'll come back at the end and kind of wrap it up with some points of how we can do this with each other. So that's where we're headed this upcoming weekend, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, so it's no, it's trust, it's rely, it's commit, and then it's touch. And depending on where you are at your life, in your life, there's, I think, something for everybody. I mean, on the surface, initially, you feel like, okay, maybe the pastors are talking to people who are single, because the advice is perfect for people who are trying to get into a relationship. But for those of us who've been home together and sort of we've had an opportunity to kind of relook at our relationships because we're right on top of each other. It's nice to kind of look at each one of these again kind of see where you stand after all these years. So I think everybody can relate to the message that you guys are providing right now.
Well, thanks, Rick. And that is the goal. What initially started off as just some marriage therapy turned into how do we all use this regardless of our, state in life or relationships. And I want my kids to hear this that are 17 and 15 as they think about dating in the future, like when they're 40, when I'll allow it, then they can start understanding how to deal with it.
All right. All right, Pastor Rusty, you ready for a local business shout out? Anybody you'd like to mention today?
Yeah, absolutely. I can go first. Randy and Rosemary over at Fast Frame, they have all of your framing needs in mind and can do an amazing job. Usually this time of year, they're doing a lot of photos and diplomas and those kind of things for graduations, and they can still do that. So contact them over at Fast Frame, located right by Kohl's and behind Islands and Cafe Rio. In fact, if you go into Cafe Rio on a Saturday night, that's usually where they are, ending their work week by getting some Cafe Rio. I'll give them a shout out as well. We love that place. So both those places over there, awesome.
My kids love Cafe Rio, and I've been over there to get some memorabilia framed from them. So that's a great one. Yeah. You know what I've learned, being that we're using our houses so much right now, things are going out. So it was time to get to fire up the air conditioner because it's been very warm lately. And then all of a sudden that room temperature, almost borderline warm air starts coming through. So a big shout out to Cantrell Air. Jim Cantrell's been a longtime friend of mine, and they got out here quick, added some Freon to my air conditioning unit, and got that thing going. And they told me that all it took was just a couple of days of this heat, and they were busy very quickly. So Cantrell Air is somebody to keep in mind. They're great. I mean, you don't know it until you turn it on, right?
Well, exactly. And, we mentioned SOS Construction last week, and Jim Ewell put in a whole house fan for us a while back in a different home. And after a couple of days of heat, I called him and I said, hey, buddy, we might want to put a whole house fan in this place we're living now. So he came out yesterday and took a look at it. So he appreciated the shout out last week. So hopefully this is helping all local businesses.
Well, I'll be calling him soon too. I've got things, and and you need people when you have things. Well, if you want more information about, those of you online watching right now are very familiar with Pastor Rusty George. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, you can find out more information about Pastor Rusty George at pastorrustygeorge.com. And you can also get more information about the Real Life Church there as well.
Yep. And for those of you that would love to tune in to Rick Garcia's radio show, it's every Friday afternoon from 1 to 3 Pacific time. And that is on KHTS, your hometown station, 1220 and 98.1. And also on the app you can download for KHTS and listen to it wherever and whenever. So, Rick, always a pleasure. And I will see you in a week, and we'll do this again.
Sounds good.